In 1907, two of the most powerful minds in Black America shared a single platform: Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois, so often cast as bitter rivals, together delivered the William Levi Bull Lectures in Philadelphia. Their subject was the economic life of the Negro in the South, and how the way he earned his bread had shaped his moral and his religious development. This book gathers 4 lectures under one conviction: that the way a people earns its living is inseparable from its moral and religious life. Washington, the founder of Tuskegee, argues that industrial training lifted the Negro out of slavery and toward Christian civilization. Du Bois, the Atlanta scholar, answers with a fierce account of how the South tried again and again to chain black labor, and how its churches betrayed the very gospel they preached. Together, accommodation and protest, they trace the economic history and the spiritual struggle of nearly 10 million Black Americans. 2 voices, one urgent question: can a nation built on this injustice still call itself Christian? Before the arguments begin, the occasion itself, a Christian lectureship, 2 famous men, and a single shared subject seen through 2 opposing temperaments. The Reverend William Levi Bull endowed a lectureship at the Philadelphia Divinity School, pledging $600 a year so that Christian principles might be applied to the social, industrial, and economic problems of the age. He wanted a free, frank, and full consideration of questions he felt the church had too long neglected, asking only that the lecturer believe in the moral teachings of the Christian religion as the true solvent of those problems. For the year 1907, the committee chose 2 Black Americans to speak. Their 4 lectures became this book, subtitled His Economic Progress in Relation to His Moral and Religious Development. It was a daring choice. In an age of lynching and disfranchisement, a Philadelphia Divinity School handed its pulpit to the Negro himself to explain his own condition. Washington and Du Bois were the twin poles of Black thought. Booker T. Washington of the Tuskegee Normal and Industrial Institute had himself been, in his words, a slave in body, and he preached patience, property, and the dignity of the hand. Learn a trade, buy land, and earn the white man's confidence. W.E.B. Du Bois of Atlanta University, college-bred and uncompromising, demanded the ballot, the schoolhouse, and the full rights of citizenship now. In these lectures, their famous quarrel is muted but unmistakable. Washington supplies the first 2 chapters, hopeful and full of anecdote. Du Bois supplies the last 2, analytical and burning with indignation. The reader watches one man patiently count what slavery had given the race, and another count, with terrible precision, all that freedom still withheld. Washington begins where the Negro began in America, in slavery, and asks the hard question of what, if anything, that bitter school had taught. Washington insists the nation is now far enough removed from slavery to study it objectively. The institution, he says, was first of all economic. It was money that brought the African to America, and money that held the race for some 245 years. The Indian and the Negro first met the white man at Jamestown in 1619, 20 Negroes and thousands of Indians, both in the deepest barbarism. The Indian, he argues, refused bondage, could not stand its physical strain, and dwindled away. By 1905, barely 284,000 remained, a costly charge upon the state. The Negro, wiser and more enduring, patiently endured, multiplied to nearly 10 million, and at every point of contact got something from the white man that made him stronger. Yet nothing, he says, Washington warns, should be taken as an endorsement of slavery, whose net result is bad. To measure slavery's moral influence, Washington names the homely signs of Christian civilization. First, clothing. Christianity, he jokes, is the only religion that makes wearing clothes a condition, for a naked Christian is impossible. Second, the house. Within months of arrival, the African was clothed and housed, no inconsiderable step toward morality. Third, and most important, work. In Africa, he claims, simple wants demanded little labor. Under slavery, however cruel its compulsion, the Negro received his first lesson in continuous, systematic toil. He recalls an old farmer at the Tuskegee Conference, proud that his neighbors now owned their own pigs. "When all my neighbors own their own pigs," the man said, "I can always sleep better every night." Beneath the humor lies Washington's whole philosophy that settled material habits prepare the ground for the life of the spirit. Crude labor soon gave way to skill, because skill paid. An ordinary slave might sell for $700. A trained mechanic brought $1,400 to $2,000 on the auction block. It is strangely true, Washington observes, that when a black man would bring $2,000, a white man would not bring 50 cents. The most skilled were even allowed to hire their own time, working where they pleased for whatever wage, paying the master a fixed sum each month. In all his searching, he says, he never found a single case where such a man failed to bring his master the agreed money. And he notes the bitter irony. In the slave South, a Negro could readily learn a trade, while in the free North, where abolition was loudest, skilled work was often closed to him entirely. As masters came to know their slaves, Washington says, many rose above mere profit. Regular religious services were held. The same minister preached to white and black, and in aristocratic families, the Lees and Jacksons of Virginia and the household of Bishop Capers in South Carolina, slave children were taught in Sunday school. So at slavery's end, after about 250 years, the race had learned to wear clothes, to keep a home, to work with system, and a few to work with high skill. From scores of African dialects, it had come to speak English. From paganism, it had become Christian. And the freedmen held a near monopoly of the South's common and skilled labor. When the master wanted shoes, he went to the Negro shoemaker. When he wanted clothes, to the Negro tailor. When he wanted a house, to the Negro carpenter and mason. Because the two races had learned to do business across the workbench, Washington says, it was an easy step to a higher commercial plane. After the war, the Negro became a dry goods and grocery merchant, started banks, dealt in real estate, and won the trade of white and black alike. In his own Tuskegee, a colored grocer held the largest retail trade in the county, his customers the best white families for 35 years, and the man who once owned him took pride in his success. Washington counts 115 drugstores owned by Negroes across the southern states, a wholesale druggist who had been a slave until he was 12, and 10 new banks organized in Mississippi in just 3 years. The South, he concludes, offered the Negro a freer field in commerce and skilled labor than perhaps anywhere else on earth. Washington's method is to move from the concrete to the abstract, to reach the soul through the hand. A missionary bound for a sheep-raising country, he advised, should first teach better sheep-raising, for the average man sees the difference between good and bad sheep faster than between Unitarian and Trinitarian. Tuskegee graduates sent to West Africa taught the natives to grow American cotton, shipped bales to the Berlin market, and improved their houses and health, until the people, seeing the better results, came willingly to church. He laments Liberia, rich in soil, timber, and minerals, yet without roads, wagons, or stirred earth, its ministers eating canned goods shipped from Chicago. And he answers the white woman who scolded a noisy black congregation with the cook's reply, "Lordy, missus, we's just blastin' out the stone for the foundation of the temple." Now Washington turns to what slavery had left undone, and to the school he built to repair it, the long, stubborn work of teaching a freed people to love their own labor. Slavery's deepest harm, Washington argues, was to teach both master and slave that labor with the hand was degrading, something to be escaped. Naturally, many freedmen confused freedom with license, expecting deliverance from all toil. The first lesson of liberty, then, was that work is dignified and to be loved. Here begins the industrial school. He honors General Samuel Armstrong of Hampton as the father of industrial education, not only for the Negro, but in large measure for the whole United States, since before Hampton there was almost no systematic industrial training anywhere, north or south, black or white. To the parents who protested that their children had already been worked enough in slavery, Washington drew his great distinction, repeated until it sank in. Being worked means degradation, but working of one's own free will means civilization itself. The new schools met stubborn resistance from black parents and students alike. They wanted their children taught the book, not farming or household work. The harder the book's name and the more volumes required, Washington jokes, the better a teacher was thought to be. Some white people held exactly the same notion. They reminded him that the race had been worked for 250 years and ought now to rest. But Tuskegee held its course, insisting on the difference between being worked and working, until every sign of opposition vanished. Within 10 years, he reports, not a single student had applied for anything but industrial training, and the demand drew students from distant states. The greatest change wrought for the race in 25 years, he says, was not a physical change at all, but a change of spirit, a new respect for Negro labor. Industry alone is not enough. It must breed intelligence and refinement. Washington recalls a mining camp of black miners who, though well paid, worked only 3 or 4 days a week, their wants so few and crude that a few days satisfied them. The cure, said one man, is to make a man want more wants: a house, carpet, pictures, books, a newspaper, money in the bank, and schooling for his children. He tells of an old couple in a broken-down cabin near Tuskegee. Quietly, he worked on the wife, describing the neighbors' 2-room houses and glass windows until she grew ambitious. The husband, once idle 3 days a week, ended by working nearly every day, the cabin whitewashed and grown to 2 rooms. Rising wants, Washington teaches, are the very engine of a rising life. Does industrial training improve morals? Washington marshals his evidence. Not 10% of Tuskegee's graduates can be found idle anywhere, and not a single diploma holder, he claims, sits in any United States penitentiary. A warden of an Alabama mining prison of 500 convicts reported that scarcely 1% had any manual training. No shoemaker, no tailor, no printer, not a man in the place who could saw to a straight line. Manual training, Washington concludes, is almost as good a preventative of criminality as vaccination is of smallpox. The record showed 90. For proof in miniature, Washington chooses Gloucester County in Tidewater, Virginia, long shaped by Hampton-trained teachers who own property among their own neighbors. There, a people who had begun in poverty 40 years before now owned and paid taxes on roughly 1/6 of the county's real estate, small farms, mostly of about 10 acres each. Where once 3/4 had lived in 1-room cabins, children now testified to homes of 6 rooms. The moral fruit followed the material. In 1903, only 8 cases of bastardy in the whole county, 2 of them white. In 1904, a mere 15 arrests for misdemeanors, only 1 of them a colored person. And in all the county there stood but one denomination, the Baptist, with no over-multiplying, no wrangling, no waste. Material progress, he insists, lifted the home and the church together. Washington measures the whole advance in acreage. Largely through industrial education, he says, the race has acquired land equal in area to the combined countries of Belgium and Holland, a remarkable record for a people that began in poverty and ignorance only 40 years before. Yet he is careful not to worship possessions. He emphasizes economic growth because wealth proves that a race can exercise self-control, plan for tomorrow, and do without today in order to possess hereafter. The American white man, he reminds his audience, set a severe test by dropping a semi-barbarous race into the very center of the world's most pushing, restless, conquering civilization. The Negro's progress, Washington concludes, will come in proportion as he learns to take the good things of the earth, consecrate them, and weave them into the service of his Heavenly Father. Now the second voice rises. Du Bois asks not what slavery gave, but what the South did with freedom, and answers with the cold eye of an economist and the anger of a prophet. Two questions, Du Bois begins, can be asked of any people. How do they earn their living, and what is their attitude toward life? The first is economics, the second is religion. The early 19th century brought Europe and the North an industrial revolution. Household industry became social industry. Machinery concentrated men and wealth in great centers, and that contact sharpened thought. The South, though it fed the system with raw cotton, refused to enter it, for slavery forbade machinery, discouraged human contact, and shackled thought. So while the world leapt forward, the South slipped backward, toward a dispersed population, compulsory ignorance, and a complete system of caste and aristocracy. By 1850, the doom was visible. Slavery still paid, but only under conditions the new industrial age was making impossible. Cotton was king, and the king was already condemned. Then came the war, which Du Bois refuses to romanticize, calling it a disgraceful 4 years, when the nation, leaving the arguments of men, appealed to the last resort of dogs. When the nightmare passed, a new order arrived. In the decade of the 1870s, the South gained 4 new economic activities: the iron industry, cotton cloth manufacture, the transport of goods, and a growing internal exchange. The Industrial Revolution had finally begun below the Mason-Dixon line. But the New South carried old baggage, the ideals that slavery had handed down, ideals of government, of labor, of caste. So when the region tried to set its freed labor to its new possibilities, it approached the task, Du Bois says, still full of the assumptions of bondage, and it would make 4 separate attempts to keep the Negro down. The first attempt was the boldest, to make the Negro a slave in fact, if not in name. The labor codes passed just after Lee's surrender held that the blacks' labor belonged by right to their former owners, to be directed by force under a nominal wage, slavery without a slave trade. These were frustrated, not by the 13th Amendment, which only directed slavery's abolition, nor by the 14th, whose civil rights went unenforced, but by the 15th, which put the ballot into the freedman's hand and made the old system impossible. The great Thaddeus Stevens, with a statesmanship Du Bois ranks above Lincoln's, forced Negro suffrage on the South. The new voters were crude and ignorant, he grants, yet sound in the fundamentals of freedom, and the black voters of South Carolina, he adds, never stole half as much as the white voters of Pennsylvania are stealing today. Du Bois mounts a defense of the Reconstruction governments the nation loves to mock. These maligned victims of a nation's wrong, he writes, did not merely attack slavery in theory, they began its abolition in fact. They established free public schools where none had existed, abolished the whipping post and the branding iron, reduced the capital felonies from about 20 to 2 or 3, and passed laws under which the white South still contentedly lives. Had they been protected in their legal rights by the strong arm of the government, in a generation they would have learned to protect themselves. But the North, having put its hand to the plow, looked back. It wavered, then allowed the black peasantry of the South to be almost completely disfranchised, and the door to a new bondage swung quietly open. With the leading class still dreaming of slavery and the laborers ignorant and powerless, only one result was possible: serfdom. This was the South's second attempt. The land belonged to the landlord and was rented to a tenant, nominally free, but in fact bound. He rose to the old work bell, was driven by mounted riders, whipped for delinquency, and given just enough once or twice a year to keep him from open revolt. Soon the furnishing merchant entered with his capital, and the law itself was bent to favor landlord and merchant. The result Du Bois names plainly: peonage. The black peon is held down by perpetual debt and petty criminal judgments. His rent rises with the price of cotton. His chance to buy good land is near non-existent, and his very life lies at the mercy of the mob. Against all this, the freedmen made 4 efforts to reach economic safety. First, the favored house servants. Closest to the master's culture, often his blood relatives, they became the natural leaders and bore the brunt of reconstruction, though most found the higher doors shut in their faces. Second, competitive industry. Slave artisans and unskilled men crowded into the towns to fight a hard battle against white labor. Third, landowning, the great dream. By gift, by bounty money, and by sweat, some 200,000 came to own their farms. Fourth, and least understood, the group economy, a cooperative closed circle in which the colored community serves itself, with its own lawyers, doctors, ministers, insurers, and merchants catering to colored trade. Together with the landed farmers, Du Bois counts perhaps 500,000 black Americans reaching safety this way. Then came a 4th Southern program, born in new cities like Atlanta and Birmingham: industry plus disenfranchisement. Strip the Negro of the vote, train him just enough to labor, and the race problem, it was promised, would dissolve. Mississippi led the way, followed by South Carolina, Louisiana, North Carolina, and Alabama. But has the problem been solved? Du Bois asks. Disenfranchisement only stripped the Negro naked to his enemies. Harsher laws, curtailed schools, mobs, and murder followed. Worse, it collided with the Industrial Revolution's hunger for intelligent labor. The landlords cried for docile workers, the white artisans for no black competitors, and the whole program collapsed into contradiction. The Atlanta Massacre was its harvest. Yet when the mob came, the Atlanta Negroes shot back and shot to kill, and that, Du Bois notes coldly, stopped the riot. The newest solution is immigration. A double-voiced call, Du Bois warns. The exploiter wants fresh labor to use as he once used the Negro. The far-sighted want to be sure that when labor's rights are finally recognized, that laborer will be white. If the immigrant gets the schools and the ballot, while the black worker stays disfranchised and ignorant, the result can only be sharpened hatred, poverty, disease, and the slow murder of 8 million Southern blacks. But give the Negro equal schooling and an honest vote, and he will gladly meet any immigrant in fair competition. The whole economic history of the South, Du Bois concludes, is the story of an attempt to degrade working men, and it has failed and will fail again. The black man asks only to start the race with hands untied and brain unclouded. From economics, Du Bois turns to the soul. The history of religion in the South, he says, is the ethics of slavery, and its bravest chapter belongs to the black preachers who rose against the law. Slavery in the United States, Du Bois declares, was an economic mistake and a moral crime, yet it had its excuses, which honesty must remember. Christianity first justified bondage as a way to bring the heathen to God, but a perplexing question followed. If a slave were baptized, was he not free in Christ? Colony after colony answered no, baptism does not alter the condition of bondage, and so the church had to invent a new theory, modeling slavery on feudal serfdom, a matter of status, not yet of race. As the democratic churches, Methodist and Baptist, went down into the fields to proselyte, the slave's condition appalled them. The Presbyterian Synod of South Carolina and Georgia confessed in 1833 that 2 million lived as heathen, with no Bibles, no ministers of their own color, catching the gospel only as it escaped through doors and windows. Out of this neglect rose the Negro's own spiritual leaders. Harry Hosier traveled with the Methodist Bishop Asbury and often preached in his place. George Liele, born in Virginia about 1750 and converted under a Baptist minister in Georgia, was given liberty to preach and became a pioneer of the faith. His convert, Andrew Bryan, a man of good sense and natural eloquence, gathered his black brethren near Savannah, and he paid for it. He and some 50 followers were seized and whipped. Twice he was imprisoned. Bleeding under his wounds, Andrew Bryan declared that he not only rejoiced to be whipped, but would gladly suffer death for the cause of Jesus Christ, and would continue to preach while he had life and breath. His steadfastness shamed his persecutors, won him influential patrons, and earned him liberty to worship in his master's barn at Brampton. Du Bois gathers more of these exceptional men. Lot Carey, a free Virginian who read Adam Smith and the Voyages of Captain Cook, refused a raise to $1,000 a year to lead the pioneer colony to Liberia, where he became vice governor and then governor in fact, dying when an upset candle ignited cartridges he was casting to defend the colonists. John Chavis, born free in North Carolina, studied at Princeton under Dr. Witherspoon and taught the sons of senators and judges in a school reckoned the best in the state. Henry Evans, a free Virginia shoemaker, founded Methodism in Fayetteville, drawing white hearers until they crowded out the blacks. And Uncle Jack, kidnapped from Africa as a boy, became so powerful and expounder of doctrine that masters sent their slaves to his discipline, which they dreaded more than the whip. When an awakened people will not go back to sleep, Du Bois warns, the result is revolt, and the South's answer would make slavery a matter of race and Christianity a matter of the color line. To teach the slave even elementary religion, Du Bois argues, was to awaken him, and an awakening people pressed back toward sleep will revolt. Many of these revolts were led by preachers. The Haitian Revolution terrified the South into curfew laws against Negro worship. In 1822, Denmark Vesey, a Charleston class leader who ransacked the Old Testament for texts of vengeance, laid a plot to annihilate the white city. Betrayed before it could strike, he and his associates were hanged. Less than 10 years later, Nat Turner, a Virginia preacher who believed himself raised up like Moses to free his people, led the bloody Southampton insurrection of 1831. A wave of legislation followed. It became a crime to teach a slave to read, and across Virginia, the Carolinas, Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi, Negroes were forbidden to preach. Through fear of insurrection and the new economics of cotton, the strife for spiritual brotherhood was abandoned. Slavery became a matter of race, not status. Even free Negroes were pushed into the caste system. A new theology denied that black men were men in the sense that white men were, different in kind, in origin, even in their diseases, and fit only for the status of slaves. This was preached from pulpits and taught in homes until the South believed it as it believed the rising of the sun. Heretics, Quakers, and abolitionists were driven out or left silent. After the war came the cruelest result, the complete expulsion of Negroes from the white churches. The Methodist Church South set its black members bodily out of doors, and from that rejection rose the independent Negro Church, a great social institution born of grievance and exclusion. Here, Du Bois reaches the post-war ethical paradox, to him more puzzling than the economic one. The Southern Church hangs the sign, "All are welcome," upon its doors, knowing full well that half its city would not dare step inside. He tells of a great Atlanta revival at fever heat. An old black outcast, wandering in off the street, dimly hears the call to come to Jesus and totters up the aisle. There is no disturbance, he is gently led out, and yet his single black face spoils the whole spirit of the thing, and the revival is at an end. And Du Bois exposes the deepest fear. Offered a choice between 500 black college graduates and 500 black vagrants and criminals, Atlanta would vote overwhelmingly for the criminals. The South does not fear Negro crime, it fears Negro ambition and success. Du Bois will not let the South escape its own logic. Every pound of evidence it offers of the Negro's degradation only deepens the indictment of its own past, for a race is not made in a single generation. Yet the present condition, he insists, is better than the history of slavery led anyone to expect. The Negro has bought 12 million acres of land, swept away 2/3 of his illiteracy, organized his church, and found leadership and an articulate voice. He asks only a fair trial, to be treated according to his desert and achievement. And he presses the final question upon the nation and the church. Judged by the precepts of Jesus, humility, mercy, and love even of enemies, it is absurd to call this nation's religion Christian. The last great battle, he ends, is not of black or white, but of all of us. Across 4 lectures, Washington and Du Bois leave us 2 truths held in tension: the patient gospel of the hand, buy land, learn a trade, and lay the foundation of a Christian life, and the prophet's reckoning, that no industry and no patience can answer injustice while the ballot is stolen and the church bars its doors by color. In 1907, their warning was plain. A people had risen from 20 souls at Jamestown to nearly 10 million, owning land the size of 2 nations, yet were still asked to run the race with hands tied and brain clouded. The question they pressed upon their listeners has never quite been answered. Is the civilization of the United States Christian? Thank you for listening.